park, walking paths, bike paths, this sort of thing. It's a strategic property that has ancient water rights, and it sits on 3 waterways, and hoping to greenbelt it. So that's a project I'm currently involved with. But nice to be a part of this group.
Cool. Thanks for joining, Jerry. And we've been joined by Michael Anthony Levitt from San Francisco, yeah? You're muted.
I'm unmuted. How are you?
Great.
Good morning. I want to thank you for the invite to maybe listen in and just see how I can help in any way, shape, or form. I sit on the police advisory board and the reconstruction of San Francisco in the mid-market district. So I've been working with city officials for a long time, about 10 years now. So just wanted to listen in and see if I could add anything to help the cause.
And how many pizza restaurants and event venues are you involved in now?
Well, currently I do the marketing and the public relations as well as the promotions for 19 pizza restaurants. I have 2 restaurants of my own, 3 nightclubs, and 3 bars, all in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then the restaurants are scattered all over California and Las Vegas.
Thanks for joining us.
And our new hotel in Palm Springs, so that's good too. Yeah.
And Tom Woodcock in St. Louis?
Yeah, I'm a partner in T2 Group. We do construction financing and construction management. A couple of our partners, we know Tom and Carol and Paul very well. Thanks for having me on the call. We have a couple projects right now. We have a strip plaza in O'Fallon that we're completely redeveloping and got the financing for, and a $50 million Hyatt in Orlando that you could take a rock and hit Disney with. So
cool.
That's who we are.
Thank you. Julie Caldwell in Ashland? Julie, you may be muted.
Hi there, everybody. Sorry, you can't see me. I'm having some technical stuff going on. I'm in Ashland. I founded Emerging Futures back in 2001 and built a city park, the Elko Peace Park, with a Tibetan prayer wheel, a Native American medicine wheel, and a labyrinth in a very conservative region of the world, probably one of the most conservative counties in the United States. And that was really fun to do with our artists and our local committees. And even some of our more conservative friends got us money for the project, which was really fun. It was a real nonpartisan effort. So I'm really proud of that. And then I moved back to Ashland, where I lived for a while, and worked on the Food Solutions Project here. We won a $50,000 grant last year from the Department of Environmental Quality from Oregon, and I recruited Paul to be the president of Emerging Futures. So I'm really thankful about that, and we have just hired our coordinator. We're producing a couple of videos, and we're just launching really Emerging Futures locally, and hopefully we're embracing Ashland, but to become a model city, to be able to actualize our city's climate action plan, and starting with food, because it's such a common denominator, regenerative agriculture and so forth, feeding people, and putting together hopefully a community website with a directory of businesses that are regenerative economies. So I'm looking forward to learning about everything on this call, hearing about where we're going, and what I can do to help. On another note, I am part of a group with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, one of the reincarnate lamas, Osil, who is also working on developing eco-villages around the world. That's it.
Cool. Thank you, Julie. Thanks for joining us. And I'm sorry, I don't know who is in St. Louis, 314-813-7885.
How you doing? My name is Todd Jansen. I'm partnered with Tom Woodcock with T-Squared Group. So Tom pretty much gave our bio, but very intrigued to hear what's going on, and appreciate everyone's time here today.
Cool. Thanks for joining. And M. Simesh, can you hear us now? You'll have to unmute. There you go.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Michelle Timish. Here on behalf of myself and my co-founder, Jenny Casson, which I know many of you know, we're involved essentially in 3 different ways trying to create a regenerative, shared well-being finance ecosystem for small businesses and startups. We have Angels of Main Street, which is an investment club designed for anyone who wants to start investing in alignment with their values. Crowdfund Main Street is an investment crowdfunding platform that's specifically designed for pro-social enterprise. And Opportunity Main Street is an opportunity zone fund where we do follow-on investing after community-based crowdfunding, which I can happy to talk to anybody about later, but thank you.
Cool. Thanks for joining, and please thank Jenny for us. And then I think last but not least, we have Carol and Tom Brayford from Arismendi. Give us the short version now, because you're going to get a chance to talk a little while later.
Okay.
Tom is going to do a short version. Let's hear this.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in everything that I read in your book, Hunter, and on your website. And now, Jeff, I am totally excited about possibility of engaging with you. I'm interested in providing solutions. I'm interested in being part of, participating in and being part of distributed expertise. And, you know, we have a eco-village project in the Opportunity Zone in St. Louis, so I'm very interested in that. We're looking at Opportunity Zone in Western Michigan. That's my stomping grounds where I grew up, and Carol has family up there as well. And I was very excited to discover that there's an Opportunity Zone right around Hart, Michigan, and we're going to have a meeting with the city manager, and a Zoom meeting with the city manager and a bunch of other people first part of next week. So need to have a lot of conversations online.
They didn't know who they were going to give this money to. They already knew. So now you have Cory Booker and others in Congress and in the Senate. They're like, we got to do another, we have to have another stimulus.
And DJ Star, and that'll be it for introductions.
Gavin, is Anthony there in California?
I haven't seen him.
I thought Anthony was in Chicago.
I'll call him today, though, if he is.
All right, let's circle back around to Jeff Mendelsohn. I'm sorry, those of you who didn't get a chance to introduce yourselves. Hopefully we'll have more time for that later on. Jeff, do you want to dive in? And I think I've given you the capacity to screen share if you want to, and just give maybe the 10 or 15-minute version of local code.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining. I'm really excited to be in the presence of all of you. You know, Gavin, we're neighbors. It's great to get to know you. I love your work. And Tauntaun, the description you gave of your local business community is really exciting to me. Everybody seems like they have a lot to offer here. So I'll dig right in. I'm calling in from a farm property. This is the view out the porch right now. And it was my test drive in doing sort of regenerative development with a social justice at the heart of it. So the farmers are equal owners in the land. We're going to participate in the agrarian trust model, which Gavin, you're probably familiar with. It's the National Land Trust umbrella, where structured the way religions often structure their land. There's a national umbrella C3 nonprofit that sets the governance and standards, and then there are local C2s, which can form anywhere in the country to own land and steward it. Churches do it for churches, and we can do it for ag land and for urban land. So the head of the land trust has been working on this for 4 years. They're just launched this year, and we're going to participate in 2 years when they do their next cohort. And we'll be putting this land into long-term stewardship. And Gavin, the question of the 99 years is an interesting one. I think we can maybe have a little working group to look at that after this call. I do think there's ways to solve that with the land trust model. All right, so I'll dive into local code. You know, just to be brief, I won't share much about my background, but I've been a social entrepreneur pretty much ever since college. And I worked on the paper industry for a very long time. And I'm happy to be now doing the thing that I really want to do, which is work on building local economies and basically regenerative development. So go into present mode here. Can everybody see what I've on my screen? Still.
Coming slowly.
Here we go.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. And this presentation is normally about 30 minutes. I'm going to do it in 10. So just don't mind if I go through a few slides pretty quickly. One thing I do want to say is there's people in the room that have been, you know, in the trenches on this for longer than I have on this exact arena. So I'm here to learn as much as to share what we're doing. And, you know, the vision for local code is to, the guiding principle behind it is that there are groups on the ground that should be and can be in the leadership position in redeveloping their economies and their communities, and that a national entity's purpose should be to support those groups and to do it in such a way that puts the long-term ownership and the leadership, it stays in the community. So that's really the ethic behind local code. This is a picture of the first Main Street that we're going to be investing in, and I'll share a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Classic, beautiful brick storefront type Main Street, which is all the uppers are basically dead. There's nobody living in the uppers, and you know, half the storefronts are vacant or struggling. All right.
Looks a lot like Locust Street, Jason, yeah?
Yeah. So the vision, very briefly again, is that towns and cities across North America thrive with regenerative local economies. And really, we're focusing on this Main Street idea. I don't want to overemphasize. There's somebody who's got not on mute. Maybe if everybody goes on mute, whoever does have the background noise can control that. You know, we do focus on Main Street, and it's both a metaphor and a physical reality. We include in the idea of Main Street the anchor economic institutions. So, you know, traditionally a lot of towns across the country and Rust Belt economies had these anchor institutions that were, you know, owned externally and were generating, you know, jobs and these and sorts of things that were where the local community had no control and didn't benefit from the profits. So we do include the idea of anchor economic institutions in the bucket of Main Street. So everybody's familiar with this. There's been this kind of really difficult to reverse downward spiral in many communities across the country, which, you know, there's a kind of a poor policies around investing in sprawl and malls and that sort of thing, and avoiding and not investing in the inner cities. We won't spend a lot of time on this because a lot of you are familiar with these dynamics. And, you know, fortunately, there's data coming out that shows investing in Main Streets and in local economies pays much better for the well-being of the community. Here's a few data points. The key one that I like to focus on is the amount of money that circulates within the community when it's spent on a local business or a Main Street as opposed to a big box or a strip mall, over 3x. And then the property values, it's kind of interesting. With all the money and investments in these types of strip mall developments, this is the actual property value of the Bay City Mall, which is in the town where we're launching. And then the property value of the Ace Hardware on Main Street, on an underdeveloped Main Street, which is still 3x the mall property value. So the question that we were facing is there are Main Streets that are doing well, and that's the interesting thing. So how can we pass along the lessons and experiences of healthy Main Streets and help communities across the country build regenerative local economies? So here's the diagram that how we've broken down our role. And again, we're coming in from the outside to support people on the ground. And we see three arenas where we need to engage. We think that trying to engage in any one of them it's a holistic issue, and it needs engagement in all three of these arenas. So the first arena is the built environment, and we set up a for-profit entity to do real estate development to address that arena. Social fabric and business community both fall under a nonprofit local code academy. We've put the business community work under a nonprofit because with local economies and local businesses, we don't want our national effort to be in a place of trying to take ownership of any of these types of businesses, but support them on the ground and build out the local ownership. So in terms of key principles, actually, I'll go to the next slide. So the key principle is to help and then get out of the way. So in the beginning, we make impact investments, investing in critical mass of real estate and investing in projects in the region to help transform the economy. We work with local management and support them. One of the key programs is an apprenticeship system we're building for local businesses. And long-term, there's a community ownership. So after the 10-year opportunity zone hold on the real estate, there's a mechanism whereby local land trusts and local businesses and investors can buy out the outside investors, and as they take their capital gains benefit after 10 years. So the first location is in Bay City, Michigan, and also Saginaw, Michigan. And they're about an hour and change north of Detroit. I'm going to now blow through a few slides so that we can get to other presenters. But basically, it's a Rust Belt town. It's gone through various stages of industrial development. A lot of factories on the waterfront, cut down all the trees, et cetera. And now it's got aging housing, aging population, and some pretty difficult challenges. It does have a beautiful waterfront, and it has a lot of good bones and ability to be revitalized. And there are people investing in it in the traditional downtown on the east side of the river. This is just a classic example of a building that was scheduled to be demolished by Chemical Bank to put up a little kind of horrible little bank office. And instead it was redeveloped to reveal this, which is sort of the building that was underneath that storefront. So doing this is challenging. And as the St. Louis folks said, in terms of the types of incentives you need to do projects, none of these projects pencil without incentives. And so it's really critical to be able to figure out how to use those. So to our strategies, critical mass of real estate. So we chose a main street on the other side of the river that had been, really just stagnating. And we have the ability to buy or work with owners on over half the buildings on this 4-block main street. We're focusing on producing residential uppers, and we believe those will sell out pretty quickly, and then work on reactivating the commercial down below. And we're buying out the problem landlords and problem properties. So there's a lot of landlords that buy buildings for pennies on the dollar and then hold them and wait for everybody else to build the value. And a few of those landowners can actually get in the way of the entire Main Street revitalizing because of the blight that those buildings can bring to the strip. So this is a quick little bird's eye view of Midland Street, which is this area we're looking at. And as you can see, all these brick storefronts are intact, but again, they're vacant. And this is just a heat map showing which buildings and properties are functioning and which aren't. And this expands the view to show the waterfront. So one of the exciting things about this project is the Main Street is right now kind of dissected from the waterfront from this on-ramp to a bridge and some boat storage, and the waterfront itself is becoming available. So we're going to connect the dots, and it'll revitalize the Main Street and also bring a whole new economic driver. And that's where this bridging of anchor economic institutions and Main Streets come together. We believe we can bring in some really interesting economic drivers in the region through this waterfront redevelopment. and that's the dotted lines are the first places we're planning to invest. Here's some project overviews, which I will go through. I'll just pass on for now. And this just gives you a visual of how the main street and the waterfront can be connected. So I think for the purposes of this call, I really want to move into, oh yeah, we're also going to be engaging in Saginaw. What's interesting in Michigan, these towns are pretty segregated, which is frustrating, but we thought we engage both ends of the spectrum. So Saginaw is a very diverse community with, the Black and Hispanic populations are over 60%. Bay City is really white, and it's interesting. We ended up landing there because of there's some amazing people on the ground trying to do some good work. But we're really excited to work in parallel, and actually the communities do relate pretty well to each other, and that's a longer topic, but we're going to work in both scenarios. This is a shot from about 3 or 4 weeks ago in Saginaw, so it's a very, very good turnout in the community in support of some of the issues that have arisen in the last few weeks. And I'm going to try to wrap. I'm going to get on to the end of this, to the part about the ownership, which is really what I want to focus with this group. So this is kind of a process map showing how Bay City, the real estate company and the nonprofit work hand in hand. With basically getting a physical footprint on the ground, engaging the community in a regenerative development process, forming research projects to help, shift the anchor economic institutions, provide apprenticeships to budding entrepreneurs, and after the 10-year opportunity zone hold period, having a right from the local land trust and local business owners to buy out the external investors. So after the 10-year period, our job's done, the buildings are in long-term stewardship, and there's local economies thriving. So this is kind of a map of regenerative development process. There's people on the call that know it as well or better than me, certainly Hunter, and I won't dwell on this slide. I think the last thing I do want to say is the 2 main projects we're going to launch out of the gate through our academy is a regional grocery and food systems project. There's a lot of great farmland around the region, but it's mostly beets, corn, and soy, all for export. We also have the benefit of being within 2 hours of Zingerman's, which is a community of cooperatively owned businesses, and Paul and Ari, the founders, are supportive, and we're going to bring their model to Bay City, and we're developing our first apprenticeships. So I think I'll just wrap with that. I do want to show a quick slide about the opportunity zones. So the entire project area is within the OZ mapping, as you can see by this overlay. And opportunity zones have been somewhat abused, where real estate companies have cherry-picked the safest projects and done kind of lip service to the redevelopment effort. For us, opportunity zone is simply a tool in the toolbox. We're not out trying to leverage them for our own benefit. We're trying to leverage them to make projects like this work. I'm not going to paint too rosy a picture. There's a challenge in this main street, and so here's a chart that the St. Louis folks know pretty well, I'm sure. Without the incentives, the costs of redeveloping these types of properties often outpace the ability to get a return, which is the gap you see on the left here. With the incentives, you can turn it around and make a profit on it. What we found is when you're in a place where there's a bunch of 2-story buildings, and the residential rent won't cover the nut, there's a deficit. So part of our model is bringing in some philanthropic support, so that when we go into a main street that has, say, 70% 2-story buildings, we can help shift the entire region with additional support, which would be funneled through local businesses. So rather than have that support go right into real estate, it would go into the building out of local businesses, helping subsidize some of their rent, and that can tip the scale. So that's the bleeding edge of our thinking right now. And we hopefully can have conversations about that during this call. And I hope I didn't run too long, so I'm going to stop my share.
Oh, you're doing great. Thank you so much. And that gives us a perspective at the local level of what's possible when you really focus attention. Let's move on to Hunter to give a broader context about regenerative economies generally and how coming out of this economic shutdown, we cannot go back to business as usual, but create an economy in service to life.
Howdy, y'all. Let me pull up this deck. Have you got the deck yet?
Yes.
Perfect. Natural Capitalism Solutions works with companies, communities, countries. I work in about 30 countries on how to help implement more regenerative practices profitably. I teamed with 3 guys to write the book, A Finer Future, Creating an Economy in Service to Life, to lay out a different, I think, better story about what our opportunities are. Basically, we have no choice. Business as usual, we are headed for collapse. In 1972, a group of grad students released the book Limits to Growth. It laid out 9 separate possible futures. Business as usual, somewhere between 2015 and 2030, the entire world starts to go into a systemic collapse. And they called out pandemics and economic collapse and overrunning our resource base, essentially what's happening today. Recently, a man in Australia updated the data, and we're squarely on track for the worst of the collapse scenarios. Don't do this, it'll put you in a very bad mood, but you can Google near-term human extinction and find what purports to be science saying that humans go extinct within 10 years. Now, when rabbits are threatened, they freeze. When humans are threatened, we entrepreneur. We have all the solutions we need to solve the major crises that are facing us, and the pandemic is only the latest. We're in a global climate crisis, an economic crisis, an inequality crisis. What we have in plenitude are crises. When we implement these solutions, it is simply better business, and it's what people want. It's based on 3 core principles. First of all, buy time. By using resources dramatically more productively, this pushes off into the future most of the worst of the crises. Then redesign how we make and deliver all products and services using approaches like the circular economy, like biomimicry. And then 3, manage all of our institutions to be regenerative of human and natural capital. These are the 2 of the 4 forms of capital that we're losing. We're increasing money and stuff at the cost of human and natural capital. That's just bad capitalism. It's also bad accounting, it's bad business. My colleague, John Fullerton, one of the co-authors on the book, says we're down in the lower left corner. We're in a degenerating world. We're losing life as we know it on the planet. We're living beyond the planetary boundaries. And what we need to do is come up this arc of transition through what we call green, what we call sustainable, to be restorative of the capital we're losing, and ultimately to create this regenerative system. Bucky Fuller said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. Build a new model that makes that old model obsolete. And the new model is regenerative. This is now the term that's popping up everywhere. Some of us have been using it for a while. My colleague, John Fullerton, wrote a paper, which I highly commend to you, Regenerative Capitalism, where he lays out 8 principles of a regenerative system. These principles are drawn from the way that nature does business. Here's how we do business. We, people, the planet, are in service to the economy, which is in service to finance. We are really good at flowing money to the top. What's wrong with this picture? It's wrong way around. Finance is a tool to bring liquidity, money, to the real economy, which needs to be in service to life. These are John's 8 principles. I'm not going to go through them now. We can do so in discussion if you like. But again, each of these is pulled from the way that nature works, the way the principles of the universe work, basic physics, basic science. The last one is, to me, the most important: honors community and place. We can have a vibrant global economy so long as every place within it has its own integrity. And this is both human places, communities, and natural places, intact ecosystems. Pete Seeger, the humble folk singer, said the key to the future of the world is finding the optimistic stories and letting them be known. So this is mostly what I do. There is no silver bullet, but we got a lot of silver buckshot. And as William Gibson said, the future's not here yet. Or the future is already here. It's just not widely distributed yet. And again, we have all the technologies we need. So we know how to power the world 100% with renewable energy, and it would be cost effective to do this as early as 2030. And it's starting to happen. GE last summer walked away from a perfectly good natural gas plant out in California, 20 years life on it, because they said it can't compete with solar. Abu Dhabi just won what I call the Walmart Award for everyday low price. Utility scale solar at 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour. Think about that. Your utility bill is probably based on power at least 12 cents. If you're in New York City, 28 cents. 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour for utility scale solar. Wind comes in at around the same. This is why GE and BlackRock are getting into it. China has said it's now cost effective to put solar on your rooftop compared to hooking to the Chinese coal-fired grid. This spring, we saw oil prices go negative. Yes, this was a short-term phenomenon, but essentially the oil business is over. It's dying. And so you see companies like Chesapeake declaring bankruptcy. When the Kentucky Coal Museum puts solar on its roof because it's cheaper than hooking to the coal-fired grid at its doorstep, you know the era of fossil energy is over. Combine renewable energy with agriculture, and you have the solution to the climate crisis, also to the crisis of how do we supply abundant, affordable food for all of us? How do we revitalize rural community? And again, it's starting to happen. This is the concept that agriculture is about the soil. It's about soil health. It's about diversity of human species, of natural species. It's about health and increasing the health of farms and communities. This was Bob Rodale's definition of it, that it improves the resources it uses rather than destroying or depleting them. It's a pretty decent definition of a regenerative system. Vandana Shiva, the great Indian activist, said it provides the answers to the soil crisis, food crisis, health crisis, climate crisis, and the crisis of democracy. One of the best advocates of it is Alan Savory, who created Savory Institute. You can go online, get his TED Talk, where he describes the principles of this. Again, it is drawn from how nature operates land. When the pioneers came across the Great Plains of the United States, they found 10 feet of thick black soil. That black is carbon. It got there because of dense herds, in that case of bison. In Africa, it was wildebeests and zebras and elephants. In Asia, it was saiga antelope. Dense herds, they're dense because they're predators about to eat them. If you're about to get eaten, the safe place to be is in the middle of the herd. So you have heavy impact. They eat everything in front of them, trample everything under them, fertilize everything behind them, and then move on. They don't come back until the grass has regrown. This is Wyoming, standing on a bridge, looking south, looking north. North is conventional range management. South is what Alan calls holistic management. And if you do this, you can double the carrying capacity of grazing animals. You increase your profits. Meet Gabe Brown. Gabe is a North Dakota corn soybean farmer. He was going broke. Because he was going broke, he said, hey, I'll try anything. First, he went to no-till. He stopped breaking the soil. Then he planted cover crops. These captured and took nutrients deep into the soil. Then he turned animals out to eat the cover crops so he could drill seed his corn and soybeans. Gabe is now wildly profitable. He dramatically cut his costs, and he has been sequestering carbon. He went from a little under 2% soil organic matter to over 11%, and on some of his plots, over 15% soil organic matter. 1% soil organic matter is 5 tons of carbon and 20,000 gallons of water holding capacity. Gabe is rolling climate change backward at a profit. So is Will Harris. Bluffton, Georgia, took over his family's cattle ranch and turned it into a regenerative agricultural operation. He has 137 employees on his 2,500 acres. His neighbor, commodity peanut farmer, has 4 employees. As a result, the little town of Bluffton, Georgia is coming back to life. This is what we're talking about with these long roots. As a result, Patagonia has teamed with the Land Institute at Salina, Kansas, which developed this perennial wheat. You don't have to break the soil, comes up every year all on its own, to make long root ale. They're making beer out of regenerative wheat. The big companies are getting into the act. Danone has pledged to be a regenerative company. Unilever, General Mills has said they're going to help farmers on 1 million acres convert to regenerative agriculture. Microsoft has said, we are going to not just be carbon neutral, we're going to be carbon negative. We're going to take back all the carbon our company has ever released using nature-based solutions and regenerative agriculture. And now Bezos has said, okay, I'm going to spend $10 billion on regenerative agriculture and nature-based solutions. Remains to be seen if they do it in the right way. But there is a tremendous amount of interest in this. BNVGL, a European company, has committed to be a regenerative company. Regenerative is a new conceptualization of wealth and progress. The future we want to see, a new purpose for humanity. What does this mean when you apply it to buildings? We've built buildings, first of all, just to be profitable. Second, we started looking at buildings to be energy efficient. We need to design buildings and indeed communities around this concept of well-being. And we're only beginning to get a clue as to what this means, but this is, I think, the future of building. A group in Colorado, Alliance for Sustainable Colorado, took a 1908 building and did an energy retrofit. So far, so good, but what they got was an uber green building that nobody wanted to be in. It was not designed for people or for productivity. So they retrofitted a retrofit. They had to fix the heating, ventilating, air conditioning system. So they said, we'll take this opportunity to do an integrated design. And what they did was to dramatically cut their energy bill, win a lot of awards. They integrated this design around human performance as well as energy efficiency. So they looked first at what are the space needs? How do you collaborate? And then how do you enable human choice to determine how you design the building? They use these well building standards and dramatically increased productivity. The well building standards look at these criteria. You can go online, get the well building standards. Basically, what they did was have individual workspaces where the light is, where the daylight is, and then collaborative spaces in the interior. People need to collaborate. People need time where they can concentrate on their own. They took a building that was unused, and it now has hosted events for over 30,000 people. They are measuring all of the aspects of it. You can go on the Alliance Center's website and get all of this. They increased, again, the carrying capacity of the building. They essentially doubled it. They doubled their revenue. They dramatically increased the appraised value. And as I said, held events for 30,000 people. If you're doing community development, you might want to take a look at a tool that we developed at Natural Capitalism called LASER, Local Action for Sustainable Economic Renewal. You can download it off our website, and I'll put this URL in the chat box when I'm done. And it is a step-by-step, how do you work through with a community implementing an economy on your own. The traditional way of doing economic development is you try to increase the flow of money through the community, in effect, community GNP. And this has been the traditional measure of success. But if you really want a sustainable community, you have to enhance all forms of capital within the community. Set new metrics for what success means. Limit the unnecessary flow of money out of the community and create an entrepreneurial climate. This is a whole systems approach to community development. We had 4 principles of LASER. As I said, slow the unnecessary flow of money out of the community, support the existing business community before you try to recruit new businesses to come in, create this entrepreneurial climate, and then ensure that any recruitment from outside truly benefits the community. Most economic development will pay the equivalent of millions of dollars per job created. If instead you went to the existing business community and said, what will it take for you to add a job here, 5 jobs there? You can add jobs in a community at very low cost and do this year on year on year just by supporting the businesses that are there. Bucky said we're called to be the architects of the future, not its victims. And again, we have all of the solutions that we need at hand. I would particularly urge you to take a look at this book. This is the recent book by Michael Schumann, who is one of the real experts on this. Put your money where your life is, on how do you do local economic investment? How do you take your 401k, your investment, and put it in your local community? michaelschumann.com is his website. Lots of material there on how to do local economic development, including this concept of local economic pollinators, of anchor institutions. And with that, I'll shut up and maybe we can have a conversation.
Thanks, Hunter. I've often said that being with you is a little like somewhere between standing in front of a fire hose and being present to a fireworks display. You always open up new vistas in my mind every time I listen to you about what's possible. I'd like to move from the general to the specific, mirroring what Jeff talked about earlier. Jason, if we can hang on to you for just a little while longer. Actually, did we just lose Jason Johnson? Oh, no, there he is. He's moved on my screen. Jason, can you talk a little bit about Midtown Alley and Arizmendi Eco Village and Jefferson Connector and some of the projects that are happening in St. Louis, and go light on the Eco Village because Carol and Tom are here. We can call on them later.
Sure. It's very interesting to hear you guys come through some of this dialogue, which is, in essence, as you know me, Paul, is I don't spend nearly as much time researching and finding out what's going on worldwide as I probably should, but we just bump along, and we've found that the success of what we've been able to accomplish in the Midtown neighborhood specifically is a testament to much of what they've talked about in kind of some of this dialogue today. And, you know, clearly we focus on our on the real estate development side, but when you develop, you know, an entire neighborhood, the business and the social side of that development can all go hand in hand, much like the diagram that she showed. And that's basically from our perspective, one of the struggles that we basically see on a consistent basis is how we bring those other two legs to the table in order to make sure that we are building a long-term self-sustaining neighborhood. Again, a lot of the things that we've been able to accomplish has taken that into account, but there's always room for improvement. You know, there's in St. Louis, there's, you know, political environment issues and racial issues and COVID issues and all those other things that make the two prongs of that triangle much more difficult than the real estate side. But again, it's a constant struggle, and the better we are about making sure we're keeping those other two parts of that triangle top of mind, the more successful the real estate development side is, given the fact that the community is more collaborative, more sustainable. And, you know, part of the thing that, you know, as I'm multitasking here, that I would say we didn't necessarily know would be as big of an issue as it is understanding, you know, how walkable and parking factors in community development play such a big role. So I always try to throw that out there as people are thinking about community development. Those are vitally important. And what's even more interesting about that conversation is how the bit of research that we have been doing, you know, recently has been figuring out where the evolution of the auto industry is going and how that's going to change, you know, as we've seen with Uber and Lyft and all these other things that are changing the automobile industry so quickly, and how that's going to affect these communities that we are building, or I should say more likely rebuilding. So we've spent enough years and dollars in our particular community that we've redeveloped the majority of the historic developments. And now we're looking at and doing our infill work, which is, as everybody knows, is a whole new kind of animal, but does give you the opportunity to think much more critically about some of the things that we've talked about today. And it just strictly is really understanding the community, the three prongs of that triangle, and how to best and most effectively bring things to the table that you can't when the existing building infrastructure doesn't limits you in some way, shape, or form. So we're just starting to launch into some of those new worlds. Clearly, none of these projects, as we've talked about, make any fiscal sense at all unless you have incentives involved, which all of ours have. But as, you know, like we say, the rising tide lifts all boats, as we've been able to continue to complete projects in the neighborhood and increase our rental revenues in these different spaces, we're just now kind of starting to hit the tipping point where we can warrant bringing on some new construction projects, given the fact that the incentives for those are much less robust than they are in historic redevelopment, which should be the case. So we have really been focused in this neighborhood and making sure that we're building trying to build as much as we can on a 24-hour city, but most importantly, bringing in the mix of both residential and commercial spaces within the buildings together in order to keep, you know, again, the parking ratios at bay and keep the buildings lively, giving them a sense of security and all those things that really play a big role in ensuring the success of a community. So I'm not sure if that answers kind of what you're looking for getting out of me, but if I can bring, you know, anything to the table, it's definitely, bringing the reassurance on how important that triangle is of those three different pieces, but also making sure that the parking component to that is really always thought about. Because when you first start on the development side, you know, there's lots of opportunity usually for parking, and it becomes less of an issue. But if you aren't proactively thinking about it and massaging those plans as you bump along, it becomes a real problem at the end.
Yeah, thanks. And that's completely relevant to what other folks are talking about. And watching Jeff's slides about the communities in Michigan, I just couldn't help but map Locust and your heat maps down Locust and how that fits into the Jefferson connector and the Eco Village on the other end. It's amazing how similar and parallel these emergences are in the different communities. So I just want to say again how inspired I am by your work and what you're doing there. And I'm glad that I got to get you to at least see and wave at some of the other people on the call today. Obviously, this call today is it's what John Rennish used to call a conversation starter. We're not concluding anything here today. This is just a how to do and a wave. But Jason, thanks for the inspiration that you're doing. Is Daryl Randall on the call, and can you unmute for a moment, because you and I haven't met, but Gerald Higginbotham sings your praises, and
he wants me on the call.
I wanted to include you particularly because I know that you're on the National Executive Council of the American Slaves, Inc., and schooled in Nora Shelton's understanding of some of the solutions to racism in America and what we need to do to integrate some form of institutional reparations aimed at descendants of American slaves. So could you say a little bit about how that might fit in with some of these things that other people are talking about in economic terms?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I listened to the woman who was speaking about laser and about how to develop communities and, you know, how we keep the money in the communities. We believe that, you know, every time a dollar, you know, passes from one business to the next and you keep it within the community, you grow the community. Right now, you know, our thoughts are that we've got to, you know, develop co-ops within, you know, the city of St. Louis and other cities to keep that going. We've got a lot of small one-on-one communities trying to do a little bit of farming, which they call these gardens in communities. But unfortunately, it's not sustainable because there's no way to protect it in the cities. And then, of course, neighbors complain if you do that. Right now, you know, ASI, or the American Slave Inc., is trying to get their footing across the country. We've got communities already working in about 7 major cities, trying to develop leaders in those communities to bring back the community from where it's deteriorating. We know that there's a lot of room for improvement, but unfortunately, the dollars to do that are limited. And as you know, we've talked about here on this phone call that, you know, there's going to be a new paradigm shift because the small businesses that were already out there have lost their footing. Trying to get those businesses regenerated and keep them sustainable for the future is difficult, especially when, you know, our communities have been hit so hard with COVID and the loss of jobs and other things that small businesses in the community are dying, you know, by the thousands. So that's our number one goal. How do we sustain this? How do we keep these businesses alive? And I don't know, maybe you all have some ideas on that. I mean, obviously it starts with the community.
Well, certainly, and I just also wanted to ask if you could comment a little bit on Nora Shelton's theories about institutional reparations. I was inspired in St. Louis a few years ago when I met Dr. Gerald Higginbotham about this notion that the issue is not just racism in the United States. In communities like St. Louis, where in the city, the population is 75% Black and neglected, like in Bronzeville, where there's a whole legacy of segregation. The issue is not just racism, but also the descendants of slaves and the legacy of lynching and slavery, which goes deep into a community. And so we have not, in the United States, made peace with our own legacy, particularly the white moneyed gentry community has not admitted that legacy and has not established institutions specifically to address that legacy. And so I see that as part of the work that you're doing and that Tom and Carol are doing at Arizmendi Eco Village and the Dred and Harriet Scott Senior Complex there.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all know that slavery was a business. And unfortunately, you know, the history of slavery that, you know, that the American slave culture was the last culture to rise up in this nation. You know, the American slaves helped build America. America wouldn't be what it is without slaves and the American slave culture. and those slaves built the foundation of this nation. And unfortunately, there's a crack in the foundation. The workers who did that and their descendants have never been able to reap the benefits of all the labor that was put into that. And so what you see is, communities like ours who have been kept out of the mainstream, and there has been systemic racism, obviously, that has kept us from creating generational wealth. Even when we got a foothold in the housing market, and we started building homes, communities, time after time we were, for instance, like in Tulsa, Black Wall Street was burned out, or for whatever reason, we were denied loans to keep our properties up. And so our properties in the cities and other places turned into ghettos. And what we're trying to establish is a way to become self-sustainable. In other words, create businesses, create our own little economy. And just like other communities have done, like the Native American Indians, and how, if you get, I grew up in Chicago, like Chinatown never lets their money leave Chinatown. It goes from one business to the next business to the next business, and it's a close-knit community, and their money stays in their communities. And so those are the kinds of things we look at. I mean, we've gone all the way back to, the Manjugan. If you understand the Manjugan and the co-op systems that they developed, that's how communities have to get started. As far as reparations, that's a tough one. Unfortunately, we know that reparations are in the Constitution, 13th and 14th Amendment. Unfortunately, what the Constitution of America is a nation of laws, and laws prevail no matter what the outside thoughts are or what the outside consensus is. The law prevails. And what the law says is that, back then, that Native Americans and descendants of slaves are due reparations. Unfortunately for us, many of the people here, now there are 30 million descendants of the American slaves that don't know that they are descendants of the American slaves. We have been given so many names over time. We were Negro, and then we were colored, and then we were Black, and now we've landed on African American, and none of those are who the Constitution says that we are. And so until we get enough of our people to recognize who they are, reparations based on the Constitution is being withheld. You always see these around tax time, that the IRS has billions of dollars in unclaimed taxes. Well, that's the way reparations are. There are billions of dollars in unclaimed reparations because there's not a block of people who says, yeah, I recognize that I am a descendant of American slaves. So part of our dilemma is learning and unlearning what people have already come to know.
That's perfect. Thank you. And I hope that we get to convene a specific thematic conversation around those topics in the not too distant future. If you forgive me, I'm going to ask Gavin Raiders, if he's still with us, if you can say a little bit about some of the things that Planting Justice is doing to address some of these issues of equity and redistribution of ownership.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, our particular situation in the San Francisco Bay Area in Oakland is, we're on unceded territory that was taken from Ohlone people, the native folks who lived on this land for 10,000 years or longer. And not too long ago in 1776, were forcibly removed from their land into, what were essentially, concentration camps. And so we Planting Justice acquired our first property on 2 acres in deep East Oakland, and immediately started a collaboration with Segurite Land Trust, which is a Indigenous women-led land trust, the first, I think, of its kind on what's now known as the United States. And so we have still, about $600,000 in acquisition loan that we're paying off. And once that amount of money is paid off, we'll be transferring the title of those 2 acres into Segurite Land Trust. Segurite Land Trust will then give Planting Justice a $1 a year long-term lease. But we want to make sure that the land stays in Indigenous stewardship for as long as land titles have meaning. It's a learning process, right now Segurite Land Trust is already active on the property every day. They have built a ceremonial space for pan-Indigenous folks that includes a ceremonial arbor, unlike any of which has been on this land since the 1700s. And so that property is primarily in a community that's about 1% white. It's in Sobrani Park. It's about half Latinx and half Black. And so almost everyone who works at that property lives within walking distance of the site. So it's primarily an economic justice project that's creating living wage jobs for folks who are formerly incarcerated and for other folks with barriers to employment. But this land trust emerged a few years ago, Segurite Land Trust did. And we're also in community with folks who are in the process of creating a Black land trust as well. And so we're helping to support that process and looking to potentially collaborate with them on these 13 acres in El Sobrante. So we formed an LLC about 9 years ago, a cooperative called Wild and Radish. And that LLC, it was the tool that we had available to us to take on debt and to purchase what was then a 10-acre property. But it's become clear as the years have gone on that the LLC is not the best long-term owner of that land, and that we are in a transitional period right now of looking to transfer title of that property to a land trust. And so we're working with potentially Segurite Land Trust again, or this new Black land trust that's in formation. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, there's a lot of learning to do, and I hope to be able to reach out to Jeffrey and other folks here for more ideas. We're working with the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which is a really great group of attorneys who are looking at, regenerative economies and sustainable economies and alternative land ownership models. One of the things that, we're coming up against is the realization that, should that land trust or whomever is on the board of that land trust decides to sell the property in order to put those funds into a mission-related project, that still is a possibility that could happen if a land trust has isn't managed well or goes into bankruptcy. That there's still the possibility that that land could be sold. So right now we're trying to figure out how, if there's a way to make sure that the land that we're developing never gets sold. And I'm not sure that that's even legally possible at this moment. So I'm looking for alternatives, and the knowledge here in this group is really rich. So that's a little bit of what we're doing.
Thank you so much. And closely parallel is the work that Tom and Carol are doing at Arizmendi Eco Village in St. Louis. So Tom and Carol, I wonder if I can call on you to give maybe the 10 or minute version of what's happening with Arizmendi, just as an introduction, so that we can follow up at other times.
That sounds good, because it's so much of what other people have shared is included in what we're creating. So it's really fun. Do you want to give an overview? And I'll cut him off if it goes too long, right?
Well, I think I heard a new, better description for what we're doing. We've been referring to what we're doing as a net positive reconciliation eco-village that's net positive in food, power, water, employment, and transportation. I think regenerative is a better way to say that. But there, like Carol said, so much of what other people have said, what you just had to share with us, Daryl. And are you in St. Louis? I didn't catch that.
Daryl in St. Louis?
Yes, he is.
Yes?
Oh, okay. So we
Daryl.
definitely got to get together because
yes, I'm in Florissant.
Oh, terrific!
Wonderful. And we're in the city.
Yeah. So we're taking a lot from the Mondragon model ourselves, and I really think that why Mondragon was so successful was that it was a parallel protected economy. You know, there was, in addition to all the 10 Rochdale principles of cooperation, Father Arizmendi added solidarity from worker to worker, from co-op to co-op, and co-op to community. And that's why we're focused on eco-village development, because we know that communities that live and work together, you know, stay together. And we see that could be the new model, or at least part of the new model. And it opens up some additional resources. Jeff, you mentioned that, and Jason, you know, certainly knows that it's really hard without some level of subsidy. And the one that we're in an opportunity zone now, so we're very excited about being able to utilize that. We also have other properties that qualify for state and federal historic tax credits. And we've been very successful with another Missouri program called the Neighborhood Preservation Act tax credits. We've accumulated over 7 million in a 35% tax credit, primarily because if you're reusing 40-year-old buildings. The thing that has been missing is the kind of thing that you're providing, Jeff. You know, we have struggled for years just to get our pre-development finished, so that we really could go after all these other things. And this distributed expertise is also another critical piece, because we may not have the track record to do the kind of scale of development, because we understand that we got to reach critical mass if we're going to make a difference. And so the way to do that is really to aggregate our experience and track record. And that's what we've been working on in St. Louis with, you know, working with the top green builder in the county and the top green systems guy. And of course, we're affiliated with Jason in some way here through Paul. And we're also looking, Hunter mentioned, you know, how important regenerative agriculture is. So we've always thought that creating a network of urban eco-villages in collaboration with a network of rural eco-villages is a really critical piece. And we're about to do that with creating a mid-state network. We've just aggregated 3 possible projects that focus on Boonville, which is a real Main Street opportunity.
Rivertown.
And we think that, and we're looking at one of the prime sites is right across the river from Boonville. So we could have a regenerative agriculture piece in connection. Carol, you just brought
I'm
up
not doing that. Paul's doing
Paul
that.
brought it up. Hold it on that piece, right? That back one. So we were contacted a few years ago by a group from Denver. So we'll send their contact information to you, Hunter. That's been working on a pod car, raised tube pod car system that's driven by the freight side. So a vehicle that can haul 1,000 pounds of freight or 6 passengers or a combination of both. And they contacted us because they wanted to make their program even more synergistic and efficient. And if we create a network of eco-villages that are strategically placed, they can double as transit and freight stations. And I think this, Jeff, this may be another opportunity to expand the funding pie with the infrastructure bills that are going to be coming out. They're circulating in Congress, and the way it's being tied to rails and trails. So this site that we're looking at in Boonville is right on the Katy Trail. And so we're looking at, one of our partners on our team, David Holtz, that's done the pitch decks that some of you have seen.
That's what we're looking at.
Oh, it is, yeah. So today he's working on expanding the Boonville pitch deck to include what we're calling this sky trolley, because it would be almost 100 feet above the river valley on one side and 50 feet above the street on the other side. And we've come up with what I think is a really great 1 mile loop that could be extended out along the right of ways for the levee all the way along, from St. Louis to Boonville and on, and then along
in
the
Detroit.
So I better shut up, or
what I wanted to do was just get a toe in the water here to see that we have so many parallel opportunities in Ashland, in Oakland, in St. Louis, in Chicago. With the little bit of time we have available, I want to kind of step back and invite people to engage in any dialogue that you'd like to with the other people who've spoken today.
This is Michael. I just wanted to say thank you so much for hosting this, Paul. You guys are all very knowledgeable, and it's been a real pleasure listening to you. A lot of the things that I work on is in San Francisco, and we're working mainly on the bar and nightclub industry and how we can, have some impactful movement there with change. One of the things that I've been able to do over the last year is to eliminate all single-use plastics in the nightclub world, especially with my spot. So we've eliminated 10,000 water bottles a week, which is fantastic. But one of the things that I've done is trying to work with the Generation Z and the new millennials to get them kind of involved in these movements that you guys are so involved with. And it's hard to do engagement, right? So how do you do that? And one of the things that I started was a musical platform. And I think it's a great access point. I'd love for you guys to share your platforms on it, because that's what it's built for. And I'm going to share it with you right now. It launches actually tomorrow. I have a band called Steamy Windows, and I'm going to share it with you right now, if you don't mind. I just want to do this real quick. Can you enable that for me, Paul, or do you need?
Yeah, let me make you a co-host here. Hang on just a minute.
this idea is basically that there's
Okay, you should be able to share your screen now, Michael.
Great. There's a lot of youth in a lot of different markets. Let's see. And that don't really know where to go for information. So what we do is we kind of draw them in with our music here, with cool videos and great positive music that you can listen to. And then we show them about the environment. And then we have a platform here. This is the music page with our videos. It's where you can get the videos, things of that nature. We'll go back to the home page real quick. TV Windows, the idea is modern music made for environmental survivability, not sustainability. We got to survive this, right? So I think sustainability should go out the window as a word that we're using. But the idea is the Steamy Windows is a reference to the global warming buildup caused by toxic greenhouse gases that, left unchecked, are sure to steam up temperatures, fog windows for change, and endanger the world as we know it. This allows us to have spotlights and a lot of different things that youth can kind of check out. So I don't know if you know this, but my mom's Katie Farrell. She's very active in the community. She talked about this spotlight on a couple of action items here called STOP. Simple things that people can do, stewards of our planet. You know, stop using a clothes dryer, information like that. What's also great about this is if you would like to share, hang on a second, where'd it go? Oh man, hang on guys. This environment page I'm showing with you has some opportunities. And I got to move you over here. That we could put a lot of your causes up here. And I'd really like to see if you guys would be interested in being on this platform, because I think it's going to be engaging for a lot of youth, a lot of the Gen Zs around the world. We're finding a lot of interest in it. So I just want to share that with you and let you know that I'm really interested in all your causes. I look forward to finding more information about these causes. And if any of you would like to join and be on this, you know, here's a Iconic Earth Foundation for an example. We would love to be able to push your agenda on this platform. And I think it's going to have a lot of traction with the youth. And I think that's where we need to start from what I'm seeing, because I'm hosting close to 500,000 people in the demographic of 21 to 30-year-olds. And this is an opportunity to kind of share what's going on around the world. So that's my kind of thing there. I just wanted to let you guys know what I'm up to.
Thank you, Michael Anthony. Yeah, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to be sure that Bobby and Stephanie were here from Los Angeles. Although they had to jump off already, but they're both 22 and engaged in this kind of stuff. And so, and Gavin's got a bunch of young people doing that too.
Gavin's definitely doing some great work down the Bay. You know, I think it's super crucial that we engage in this next generation. You know, they really need to get involved. And some of these kind of incubator platforms allow them to feel like it's still cool, it's still hip, and then they can get engaged and actually get some really good information. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, panel.
It sounds really good. Can I jump in for a second, Paul? This is Carol.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, I want to be respectful of people's times. I said it would be an hour and a half, and we got 2 minutes left.
That's 2 minutes. Okay, well, I'll connect with Michael separately about that. But I'm seeing the same thing with young people working on climate change. So yeah, great. Okay.
Yeah, Hunter.
Michael, you're welcome to pilfer anything from the Natural Capitalism website. I have no clue how to do that, but if there's anything on there that you want, let me know. I'll have our web guy get it to you, or just grab it if you've got people capable of doing that.
Fantastic.
Carol and Tom, watch out for those pod transportation people. It's vastly more aspirational than it is real. They've been at this for decades and it's not there yet.
Yeah.
I know there were some problems at Masdar with actualizing that dream.
Yep, didn't work.
All right, Jeff, parting comments?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this a lot. I think there might be a subset of us interested in sort of looking at ownership models over time. Definitely, Gavin, you brought that up. And I'm interested in, being on the cutting edge of how we can, heal some of the inequalities. And, I appreciated the work around reparations. I think my approach as a white guy would be to simply do everything I can to help, more businesses start and more real estate come into the hands of people in communities, and especially in communities of color. So that's what I can do. But I'm interested in people that want to talk about the ownership of the evolution of ownership and building local business communities. So Tonton's work and Gavin's work and other folks on the call want to talk about that. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Special thanks for joining us this morning. This is an auspicious beginning. You all know how to reach me. I'll be in touch about possible next steps and where do we go from here.
Hey, Paul, real quick, Daryl Randall
Yes.
here. Carol, I know you're in St. Louis. Can I give you my cell number?
Yep.
If you got a pencil?
I got it.
314-401-4104.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
And let's touch base.
Give me a call. Great.
Actually, Paul, I was wondering, do you often send a recap of the meeting? I know some of it was recorded. Are you going to be able to share kind of emails or anything like that? Because I'd love to reach out to everybody.
Does anyone have an objection to my sharing the recording?
No.
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Sounds good.
Right. We'll consider that the opt-in. Thanks very much. And this is just the beginning.
Great.
Peace be with you all.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you, Paul.
Well,
Great job, guys. Awesome.